Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 5th policy meeting of the Board of Education. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So everybody has their policies either on their tablets and or in front of them, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Somewhere.
We're gonna start with policy 1521, which is notification of release of sex offenders. And again, the bold is just the information that was sent after review by the attorneys. Anyone have any questions on that? We'll move that forward. Policy 2600, also school census. A lot of times when we're going over policies, it has to do with just reaffirming or clearing up the wordage. So that we have the, yeah, that's not really a word, but whatever. We have the attorneys go over it to make sure there's nothing that needs to be changed or anything based on law or current standards. Does anybody have a question on the school census? Quiet on the canvas. Policy 3540, retroactive health insurance premium refund. Talk today. Again, the two words changing at the top of the paper. Does anybody have anything they want to ask on that? Okay. Policy 4157 is the absence due to injuries received on the job. Not going to read the whole thing. They're just adding one word. Yes.
Just trying to understand the policy a little bit. I was reading it, it said that if they're sick and they need to be off for workman's comp, they would use 2 sick days and get paid a whole week. I was just trying to understand how this gets applied, and is it a whole week as if they were in school, so all the benefit policy with it? Or is it another way? I'm just curious to understand the policy.
Workers' comp works?
Now, how this policy works with workers' comp.
It is workers' comp. I mean, that's basically they take the first 5 days as an absence. Then it can be charged against it. If they have sick leave bank, or the, I guess, accounts available. Beyond that, then it goes through a workers' compensation plan. So, I mean, if they have availability, it depends on the person, it depends on their employee status also, so.
Am I,
Yeah, that's right.
if I may, so I think the question, I could be wrong. I think the question is where it's saying they can elect to accept workers' comp, or they may use 2 sick days for every 5 days of continued absence. Is that the question
Yeah.
you're asking? So that's how the policy works. They can go to workman's comp where they're not getting paid properly, because then you have to go through the whole policy, whatever, or you can do it at this.
Right, so they're getting paid only 2 days in that case, or?
Yeah.
They're getting paid all 5? Right, that's what my question, so they're getting.
Workers' comp is often not full payment, sick.
That I know,
Right,
it's my fault, so they get 2 sick days for the 5 days of the week, we're not paying them 5 days for using those.
You're getting paid for the week, am I not correct?
That's what I'm trying to
And,
find out.
but only getting charged 2 days.
So the district is paying for the 5 days, we're only charging for 2 of the days.
We're taking entitlements away for 2 days,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, fine, just want to understand, thank you.
Okay, so no other questions with the addition of just his or her?
No.
Correct? Okay, policy 5121, which is corporal punishment. There were quite a few changes based on regulations made by the attorneys. Do we have any questions on the additions and or removal on this policy? Sorry. Policy 8341. Procedure to be followed by the board secretary to keep track of board business. We're removing this bottom part, obviously. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
What's the benefit of removing this part?
I haven't been doing it. Honestly, it's just, I don't see the purpose because everything's online. Just to keep track of one by one writing.
So, okay, so all the information's still there. It's just
Oh,
whether you're
Right, it's
writing it, you're. Okay,
double duty.
fine, thank you.
It's one of the new ones, correct? So computer resources and data. All right, let me try that again. And data management is a new policy that's required. So everybody read and understands. This was part of it, recommended by the controller's office audit. Everybody's okay with this policy? Yeah.
Just on page 2, 3, 4, paragraph 3, Roman numeral 3. I was wondering if it says over here, all staff and third-party users, shouldn't it also say students and parents?
Parents don't use the district's computer system.
Even if it's under their child's account, if they're disabled, does it view them?
I think the district does have other regulations related to student.
What? Yeah.
There's other procedures that are involved for student usage. So this policy is only addressing staff and third party users using district.
If you go back to the page that has the title, the resources and data management regulations,
Mhm.
bold, and go down to section 2, internet access. Talks about student employee internet addressed in policy 70 and 5170 AR. So that, I think that further adds to it. Then there's other policy that would address, right? Rest.
Students.
So they would be included. That's why I had asked, because when I read it too, it's talked about students, just.
Right, they're
like, it's
saying-
consistent.
They're basically saying that that's
Covered it.
where it's addressed.
And it's third-party users, it says third-party users, isn't that everybody else?
Are there any other questions on this policy? The next policy is the workplace violence prevention policy statement. Did everybody get a chance to read this? Anybody have questions on it? Move that forward. Thank you. Okay, so the next, hold on one second, I'm gonna move these over. Next policy we're gonna discuss, which we've tabled since the last meeting, is policy 4100, which is the ethical conduct for West Hempstead public officers and employees. So I know that there were questions on this.
You can go first. No, go first.
First, I want to apologize for forgetting to attend the last policy meeting. We probably could have maybe resolved some of these questions, but before we finalize them, I thought it would behoove me anyway to raise the issue I wanted to raise. Also, and my comments apply to both policies, 3124 and 3132 in general. Okay,
4100 and 9280.
policy 4100 and 9280.
Okay.
Okay, so it's, and I didn't focus specifically what changed since the last version of the policy that we had, but I read the both in their entirety. And it seems to me that historically it would appear that these were one policy at one time, that we try to separate, one ethical conduct for the public officers and employees, and then separating out the school board member ethics portion of it. And, but it looks like it's not completely done because there's lots of references in the one for the public officers and employees to school board members. And there's lots of references to public officers and employees in policy 9280. I'll give you some examples if you need. Okay, so on the policy 4100.
Wait, I just want to stop you for one
Yeah.
second because I just want to. 9280 was adopted before the other one.
So there was no ever attempt to separate the two.
Negative.
Okay, but in any event.
No, I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
But it looks like, I didn't know that, thank you, but this appears from the titles that they're two distinct issues. May be related and that a lot of them are the same rules that are applicable. But it looks like from the wording, and I'll give you the examples, it looks like we have portions of both sitting in both policies. For example, in policy 4100, in the first paragraph on the second line, well, this is not where it's redundant, but it says rules of ethical conduct must be observed. And then on line 5 of that same paragraph, it says the rules shall serve as a guide. So that's two different ways to apply the rules. One says that they must be applied, and the second one says they'll serve as a guide. So there's a little bit of an inconsistency in that paragraph on how these rules should be applied. Okay, so that's one issue that's actually in both, for that matter. It's a straight pull of the same paragraph. Next one is on the definitions on the same page 1. Makes reference to municipal officer or employee, includes admin board. So I don't know if admin board includes the school board or not, but if it does, then maybe it's redundant. Okay, if we move to page 2 on the confidential information section, talks about school board members. On page 3, number 5.
Wait, you're going
I don't know.
too fast.
Okay.
So on page,
I
wait,
don't
because
understand.
I thought,
on
oh, I
page
think,
2,
yeah.
talking about confidential information. But wait a minute, let me just clarify if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
And I don't know if this is going to be considered legal counsel and if we have to go inside or not, but public officers and employees are not necessarily, does not necessarily mean just the Board of Education, which is why there is a Board of Education policy. Is that accurate?
That's correct. They include other, like superintendent.
Right. And any other like central office administrative.
Correct.
This is pertaining solely to school board members, 9280.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure I'm,
right, but then it talks about that the board acting as a whole can decide to disclose such information
right.
where disclosures, so that's really more board. It would seem.
So what
Not
page are you on now?
not to the employee or to the officer.
What page?
It was still on number 2, confidential information on page 2.
Oh, what, oh,
4100.
Yeah, we're still on the first one.
But yes, they can't do it, but we can do it, if that's what it's saying.
So that's why that one would be relevant, perhaps. Okay. Okay, now if I move to page 3, paragraph 5, talking about members of the board, in this section here. In paragraph 6.
Wait. Okay, so wait,
I'll go slower, okay.
wait, I just want to speak to that then.
Yeah.
This is in the same regard, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. This is in the same regard. This is discussing somebody who's giving an opinion to the board. So we're going to be in here because the superintendents may be giving us information. So in the first one, in 4100, where it's talking about them giving information to the board, and then we're talked about here in how we can utilize that information.
Right, but then we as board members have to disclose if we have any personal connection or personal interest in the nature of the discussion. So it talks about the obligations that we have as a board.
Okay, go ahead.
Right, so that's there. Number 6 on disclosure of interest in contracts also has in there reference to board members.
Okay, but
Number
so
6.
tell me where you're going with the disclosure of interest in contracts. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I'm just saying that when we have 2 different policies, we don't have to disclose board member obligations and the ones for corporate for officers and employees and vice versa. That was.
Where,
that was my-
where am I seeing, I'm not seeing in 6 on the second one,
Well, it starts out with.
this would,
Board
okay,
member.
all right,
officer,
forget it, I got it,
employee.
I got
They're
it, go
talking
ahead.
about it as a group.
Right. because
Okay,
it's
we
the same-
didn't have to have board member because we have a separate, one for board members now. And,
Can I ask a question? In you kind of going on these points, what is the general point here?
okay, the general point is, so now we have a policy for board members and what our obligations are, board ethics, and similar policy dealing with officers and employees.
And why is that problematic to you?
No, that's great. That
Okay.
clarifies things, certainly. But we have remaining references to both in both policies instead of cleaning it up.
I still don't understand what the problem is though.
So.
Yeah.
Chris, and tell me if we should take this to executive
Exactly.
session, but
Just removing the word.
Board member?
is there,
Certain policies.
It was directed towards certain people. It shouldn't have both in the opposite and the other.
is
policy.
there a reason that we can't take the word board member out of number 6 in policy 4100? Or is it simply there because that
But I
does
think
say
that that's-
public officers, which would also mean us?
I mean, I understand you have a policy that's just board members, and you have a policy that's officers, and that includes board members.
Right, so which is
So
why the word is
so-
still
So
there.
I'm not necessarily, these policies are made over time, right?
Right,
Every-
but now we're taking a fresh look.
Every board makes their own policies and how they go on. I don't see anything that's inconsistent between the two policies. If there were, then that would be something I'd be concerned about. So you can have,
There's nothing consistent.
that you can have one policy that addresses just board members and one policy, how you have it, that includes board members and other officers, if you choose to do it. If you wanted to remove board members from this other policy and keep them 100% separate, you would have the right to do that if you wanted to.
If the wording is consistent in both, does it make a difference to go back and change it all?
We would have
You would have
recommended
advised us to do so.
and told you to do so if we thought there was a legal necessity. Like, if there was an inconsistency between the policies, I would be telling you that's a problem. You can't do that.
Right.
Here, it's really preference, how you choose to do it. If you wanted to eliminate the language in the second policy, you could. You're not legally required because they're not inconsistent. with each other.
I don't necessarily think, and again, my opinion, I don't necessarily think it's an issue in that if somebody goes to this policy and just assumes public officers means administration, staff, whatever, and the board, that the information is there because they found the
So let's just
policy
have
and
one
it's there.
policy.
But I don't see why we need one policy if we have both. Why
Well,
would we need?
we
Well,
wouldn't have,
overlap.
we wouldn't have just one policy because there's still information about the
Correct.
board separate unto
Why it should
itself.
be separate.
But there's no reason that these policies can't reflect each other, is the point. I think that,
And where would you put this?
Just sloppy.
well, oh,
Conduct.
no, right, like there is stuff in here that talks about the educators and stuff in here that solely talks about the board, but I think it references in here, does reference the board as well.
Okay.
Let me just,
Go
do you have other questions about this? Like,
No, then I would move to what was different about the second policy.
okay,
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna ask the
Yeah.
question then here. Is there a, what's the word I'm looking for? Consensus to take the board out of the first policy, 4100?
No.
Is there,
I don't,
okay, how about we do this? Who would like to see it become one policy?
No, not one policy. That's not.
We don't want one policy,
Right, that's
right?
not
Who wants to take the board out of 4100?
Different parts of the policy that refer to a board member. And if you're saying that the 32 or the 9280 has the same exact language, why just not take that?
Again, that's up to the board.
If they're the exact same, as far as the
Wording.
the standard of conducts, gifts, confidential information, representation, like everything is duplicate in the 9280. Not just take that.
Take out the word board in all these
Any
locations?
Any reference.
Well, but I don't agree with that because like,
Well,
wait,
in-
wait,
in
wait,
certain-
wait, hold on. Because in the first part, the confidential information part, I would be leaving in the part that says, however, the board acting as a whole may disclose, because they might not be allowed to, but we can make the choice to. So that's not something I would take out. So then this would then go back to the drawing board where I would have to say, we'd have to mark it up, bring it back to the table again. So the question is,
Or we could just leave.
Like I'll say, this and future boards, as a board member, should have one reference point, everything about board member. My go-to guide for board member.
right, but this
I
is
should
your
have to look at
go-to
every
guide.
policy to see where it happens to
There's two
show up.
policies,
Where else,
not every
is it
policy.
different? Is it the same?
This would be your go-to guide for board members, the one that talks about board members.
Right.
This is a reference to this.
That's good.
So you don't have to look for this. You
I
have to
know,
look
I
at
know that
this.
now, okay?
So that's my point. So
But
I'm
mine
gonna
was just
ask.
point,
wait,
here
I'm
are
gonna-
our policies. and I
Right,
figured that out.
I understand that. So I'm gonna ask one more time. Who at the table is looking to remove or remove most of board reference in policy 4100?
No.
Okay. We'll move forward with that. Mr. Lazard, do you have questions on 4100?
My question's on 9280.
Okay, so I'm gonna move this forward. The next policy is 9280, which is school board member ethics. So, Mr. Lazar, your question?
Yeah, we'll start off with the first one that has to do with, the question about that everything should be funneled through the, president of the board.
Right,
And
and which page was that on that?
I think it was towards the end of it.
And what was the question?
So the one thing that we had prior to making this change was sort of there was a timeline that was created where the superintendent had to be able to answer certain questions within. And I'm curious if this removes that expectation.
Karen, what
No, and, page, the third to last page. Number 4. Oh, fourth to last page, sorry, number 4. Okay, so there was no timeline. It was stated that it would be in a, I don't remember the exact wording, but that, we'll call it a timely fashion. However, the superintendent also has the right to determine that those answers are not available and it will take a certain amount of time to do so. That does not negate this. This is
No,
only
this
me
does not
sending
negate
it.
that,
Yeah,
right? Because I know that this is not your full-time job. And whoever will be the president in the future also is
Right.
their full-time job. I don't want it to be something that affects the flow.
kicking me out already.
No, but I know that you're busy.
Just asking.
So that's why I just want to make sure that this doesn't negate it. I want to ask Chris also, this doesn't negate the timeliness of the,
I agree. I don't agree with that.
fine. Then I'm fine with that. Now, the other question I have is, and I'm not trying to claim that anyone is doing anything wrong. This does talk about conflict of interest. And I don't know if this is a question that should be asked here or executive session. I want to know how this applies to certain cases that are currently in the district.
Which, tell me which piece of it.
Well, we talk about conflicts of interest with disclosing interests and contracts. We discuss it with talking on motions and voting on motions.
So I'm gonna, say that we should adjourn into executive session for advice of counsel. I need a motion.
So moved.
Do we know?
I do.
Before we get there, do we know, are there any other legal questions?
Well, I have more questions on that particular
But is it
policy,
gonna
but
be,
it could lead to a legal question. I have no idea.
Okay.
Should I?
I'm sorry?
Everybody.
No, because the
No, we
computer
haven't.
is still on.
The computer.
So we're gonna,
They can't mute it? He can't mute
We
it?
can.
Us? He can't mute us?
Just leave it. We
Or
can
shut it
stop
off?
I think-
you can mute it so that it, well, we can't
And
stop
stop
it because it's
recording,
not.
You can stop recording. Because
No, but we
Yeah.
can't be talking. People can hear us.
If you mute, then we should be able to stand.
All right,
I mean,
You move them, they can't talk.
You-
Hear us.
mute us.